They've grown up, some of them have got married because initial problem started in 89. They grew up, they got married and they settled there. So no, army is not responsible for people who have gone across. And today, many of them are coming, we don't allow them to enter, so they come back via Nepal and Bangladesh to Calcutta and then come by train to back to Kashmir. Now, I would like to tell you a few cases which happened. Most of it I was present. First in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan operation, we had a battalion entering when the fights had started. We lost large number of people of one battalion, another battalion was inducted. In a house, large number of women were crying and this officer, a major, entered to pacify them, to find out what happened. When they came out of the house, he was coming out, one of the women took out a pistol from the undergarment, shot him from behind. Second, in Kupwara in J&K, I was the battalion commander, we were being inducted. First operation, there were militants in a house. The militant opened fire at the leading company. I was the battalion commander. I told the company commander, you return the fire and go closer to the house and throw 2 grenades in it. He did not do that. Later on, when I asked him, he said that he found one lady along with a child standing next to the window. And meanwhile, when we cordoned the house, the militants had escaped. Third, a recent vintage. There was a case where in 36 RR in Srinagar, one boy was missing. He had gone to the company post and he was missing from there. There was a protest. 3 days, the entire life in Srinagar came to a standstill. And after 3 days, this boy came back to the house. He was actually abducted by the militants, and militants want this post to be shifted. So he came back. Thereafter, nobody spoke about, not even an apology was given to the army that we actually suspected, we were wrong in suspecting the army. Lastly, I would also like to tell you that there were, so far, from 93 to 2012, there have been 1,532 allegations against the army. These are established allegations by various groups, human rights violation groups, various group of lawyers, judges, etc. Out of this, 1,508 were proved to be false, accepted by these groups who gave these complaints. Balance were proved correct by the army. Army, as per the Army Act and the Defence Service regulations, have taken action against them. We have sent people on court-martial, sent them to jail, cashiered. Very serious punishments were given. Compensation was paid to 134 people who suffered because of this. So it is not that the army has not taken action. If you actually look at the action taken by the army against the culprits and compare it with whatever action has taken by the civil, why doesn't this human rights organization go and ask why actions have not been taken in the civil courts? So we are telling you that wherever we found guilty, they have been punished in quick time. That is not happening elsewhere. So I conclude here. I am strongly of the opinion that there is no need of any code of ethics to be enforced on the Indian Army. Thank you.
Beyond balancing the information asymmetry, thank you, sir, for clarifying that there were certain inherent difficulties with imposing a code of ethics. To talk about how a stricter code of ethics can account for some of these concerns, I call upon Mr. Velat.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Velu Gopal has made a very eloquent defense of his side by using the very familiar national security arguments that we are very familiar with. But before I begin, I want to ask him and his side, what about the Patribal encounter? The CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, has investigated, in fact, one of the shortest and best investigation by CBI in its history, has held 5 army personnel accountable and has said and has very clearly given the evidence that they were responsible for picking up 5 innocent villagers because there was pressure to respond to the Chachi Singhpura massacre. And this massacre happened, around the time when President Bill Clinton was visiting India. The bodies were burned to destroy evidence, but somehow CBI was able to piece together, bit by bit, all the evidence and presented to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court took cognizance of this report and has asked the army to hold a court-martial within 6 months. But the point is, why is the government of India refusing sanction to prosecute? Section 7 of AFSPA prevents sanction to prosecute. In fact, till date, not a single AFSPA-related case has the government of India allowed sanction for prosecution. And I'll come to that in my submission later on. General Venugopal talked about the fact that people in Jammu and Kashmir want the army. Why are there then more than 6 lakhs Defense Armed Forces personnel in Jammu and Kashmir? General Venugopal talked about the fact that the army has a code of ethics. I'm glad that he talked about it. In fact, the Indian Army doctrine issued in October 22nd, 2004 talks about a very detailed code of ethics that the army is expected to follow. But he did not go into the details. And I'm glad he did not go into the details because I'm going to make you aware of some of the provisions and then hold General Venugopal accountable on some of the things that he has said on this stage today. I am also reminded of one of the comments that he made, that General Venugopal talked about the fact that they carry the code of ethics in their pocket. I'm glad they do that. But let me remind you of a stunning piece written by Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, the former 15 Corps commander based in Srinagar. And he was talking about the code of ethics, and he was talking about how do we move beyond winning hearts and minds to doing something more. And he came out with a doctrine which says that heart is my weapon doctrine. And he said that there has to be training imparted to army personnel that gets them out of a particular mode. And this is what he said. The current mode of thinking in the Indian Army is kick them in the pants, peace will follow. He also talked about the Banihal syndrome. Banihal tunnel is the tunnel that leads you from Jammu region to Kashmir region. And he says that as new units and troops come into the Kashmir region from Banihal, all that they are bothered with is the mathematics of terror. How many kills? What's the body count? So General Venugopal talked about training, and I think these are issues that the Indian Army needs to look at in terms of what is it that it is imparting to its service personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my contention that the armed forces have failed to uphold its own code of ethics during counterinsurgency operations. The Indian Army doctrine issued on October 22nd, 2004 has an elaborate and detailed enumeration of a strict code of ethics. And please permit me to liberally quote from these code of ethics because just as the Indian Army, I have difficulty in remembering everything. The doctrine states that the role of the armed forces is to uphold the ideals of the Constitution of India. If that is the case, ladies and gentlemen, then the armed forces have severely breached its role in the case of Parveena Ahangar and thousands of other women in Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast. I recently met Parveena in Srinagar. She is the chairperson of the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons in Jammu and Kashmir. She last saw her 16-year-old son Javed on August 18, 1990. She says she knows the identity of the 3 officers who took her son away. She has filed repeated court petitions to have those officers punished, but nothing has happened. Military officials have offered her money to drop her petitions, but she has refused such deals. Just as she refused to accept that Javed is almost certainly dead. I have known Parveena for 2 decades now, as a journalist and now as a team member of Amnesty International in India. And after each meeting, when I got up to take her leave, she has told me this: I want my son back and I want justice. If you ever go to Parveena Angar's office in APDP, you will see stacks of files with pink slips, with names, pictures, ranks and units of soldiers and police officers accused of perpetrating the crimes. It's all over her office. That's an office that I would request General Venugopal to visit. Let's not mistake, ladies and gentlemen, that the armed forces do not have a fine and nuanced understanding of its role in counterinsurgency operations. They do have. And let me quote from para 5.1 of the aim of military operations and counterinsurgency operations. I need to spend some time on this because I believe that today's debate is on code of ethics. And I'm quite surprised that none of the speakers on this side have actually stressed on these code of ethics. Let me quote: when employing the army in low-intensity conflict operations, conflict management rather than conflict resolution will be the political objective. It will be preferable to aim at low-profile and people-friendly operations rather than high-intensity operations related to body and weapon counts. Let me go on and quote: popular support is the cornerstone of all CIOps. All action, including military operations, should be undertaken to seek the voluntary and willing support of the people of the affected areas. Ladies and gentlemen, the code of ethics as given in the army doctrine very clearly states that the armed forces have to seek the approval of the local community in which it is operating. In the sense that the operations have to be people friendly. Though the code of ethics sounds very lofty and ideal, let me share the results of a little known but rigorous survey carried out in 50 villages of Baramulla and Kupwara in September 2012. The survey found that in these 50 villages, 437 people have been killed, 65 have disappeared. Out of the 437 people killed, 320 were killed by armed forces, police, paramilitary forces, etc. 84 were killed by militants, and unidentified gunmen were responsible for 33 killings. The question automatically arises: why hasn't the government of India ever made a serious effort to investigate these allegations? But I'm not going into this line of argument. On the contrary, I would like to draw your attention to the following stated ethic mentioned in the Indian Army doctrine. It says, any excesses by the troops, provoked or otherwise, or errors of judgment of commanders must be candidly and promptly admitted, and swift corrective actions in a free and fair manner must be taken while guarding against any adverse effect on the morale of the troops. Isn't it strange that while the armed forces profess lofty ideals and strict ethics and its doctrine, in practice and during operations, it has failed to uphold them? May I also share a statistics with you? In the last 4 years, the Ministry of Home Affairs has denied 41 sanctions to prosecute. And a lot of these sanctions to prosecute are with regard to cases of murder, rape, etc. It's important for me, permit me another minute please. It's important for me in the context of the Delhi gang rape to point out sexual violence, allegations of sexual violence that have been leveled against the armed forces. The Code of Ethics in the Indian Army, as specified in its own doctrine released in October 2004 says, all operations against women militants or terrorists should be conducted only in the presence of women police personnel. Let me ask you, don't we know about the Manonama Devi case, who was an alleged PLA militant in Manipur? Don't we all cringe in shame and embarrassment whenever we remember the photograph of 12 mothers who had lost their children, who went to the Assam Rifles headquarters in Imphal, stripped themselves, held up a banner, and the banner said, Indian Army rape us. The killings and misuse of ASPA in Manipur prompted Iram Sharmila to go on a fast. 10 years later, Iram Sharmila has courageously continued her protest, but ASPA remains. Tell me, ladies and gentlemen, what can we do? What can we do when the code of ethics stated in the Indian Army doctrine explicitly states, promptly attend to the directions and instructions of the civil courts? When summoned by a court, ensure dignified conduct and maintain decorum of the court. But there hasn't been, till date, any conviction of any armed forces personnel for a crime committed under the shield of ASPA. The government of India had steadfastly refused to give sanctions to prosecute. Like I said, in fact, in the past 4 years alone, 42 requests to sanction for prosecution of the military personnel have been refused by the government of India. We are not saying this. It's, for the armed forces, human rights activists and human rights activism is a favorite punching bag. But would the armed forces want to use the Supreme Court also as a punching bag? Why is the armed forces reluctant, if they have opened human rights cells much before NHRC, why are they reluctant to share the database? What have they done? How are those proceedings conducted? This is not a national security issue. In early 2012, the Supreme Court of India said that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which makes the central government sanction mandatory for prosecution, ought not to cover cases in which crimes such as murder or rape were committed. And let me quote from the judgment. Quote, you go to a place in exercise of ASPA, you commit rape, you commit murder, then where is the sanction to prosecute? Then where is the question of sanction? This is what Justices B.S. Chauhan and Swatantra Kumar, judges of the Supreme Court of India, asked of the Indian Army. The Indian Army insists, as General Venugopal said, that it has court-martialed dozens of personnel for human rights violations. But why doesn't it release trial records? Why doesn't it release names? Why does it make it impossible to verify whether any of the alleged perpetrators were tried? Is this how the armed forces intend to win the hearts and minds of people of J&K and Northeast? Is this how the armed forces intend to uphold its own code of ethics? Can the armed forces ever hope to win the hearts and minds and ever be able to seek popular approval for their presence in insurgency-prone areas? In conclusion, I want to bring to your notice a good facet of the armed forces, the brilliant record of the Indian Blue Helmets. General Satish Nambiar, can talk a lot about it. But this is important, ladies and gentlemen. The contrast between the Indian peacekeeping operations and the appalling record of the armed forces in its own country. Indian peacekeepers working under UN mandate have by and large strictly abided by international principles, such as the UN Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement, such as the basic principles in the use of force by law enforcement officials. From Lebanon to Congo, and I have some experience in this as a roving foreign affairs correspondent of having covered Indian peacekeeping operations. Indian peacekeepers have endeared themselves to civilian populations. In Lebanon, in Congo, of course there were some aberrations, but the Indian Blue Helmets are very popular and have invariably got popular approval by the civilian population wherever they've operated. Why isn't this case true in the case of Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast. So why does the armed forces have a splendid record in peacekeeping operations and have a counterinsurgency operational record at home that is appalling? The Indian Army doctrine and the Code of Ethics is expected to be reissued every 10 years. The next review is scheduled for 2014. This House should resolve to enforce the existing strict Code of Ethics and push for a thorough review as soon as possible. Thank you.
Bringing the debate back to the Code of Ethics has made it explosive, and without taking time, I shall invite Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar on behalf of the opposition.